Good morning, this is the morning from the New York Times for Friday, August 14, 2026. I'm your host, and we've got a packed briefing today, from the reliability of political polls to an aircraft carrier deployment stretching nearly 9 months, a mosquito factory in Brazil, and the signature shot that defines the Evil Dead franchise. Let's dive in. We're going to start today with a question that's been nagging at political observers all summer. Are the polls actually capturing what's happening on the ground? Nate Cohn, the Times' chief political analyst, writes that progressives thought they would clobber moderates in primaries this month. The polls had set extraordinarily high expectations, a double-digit lead for Dr. Abdul El-Sayed in the Michigan Senate contest and more than 20 points for Francesca Hong in Wisconsin's primary for governor. Instead, El-Sayed won by a single point, and Hong lost outright. Primary elections have always been hard for pollsters. They're uncertain, volatile contests with low turnout where voter preferences can switch on a dime. But Cohn notes it's pretty unusual for polls to badly overestimate the same political faction twice in 2 weeks. The question is whether these errors betray a deeper problem measuring the strength of moderates against the progressive left. Based on just 2 races, it's hard to say for sure, but the answer may be yes. Let's look at Wisconsin first. The polls missed by a lot more there than in Michigan, but Cohn argues pollsters deserve a pass in the state where they did worse. This was a classic example of why primaries are so hard to poll. Progressive Democrats quickly consolidated behind Hong, a Democratic socialist. The party's establishment, on the other hand, struggled to put forward a candidate at all. Over the final month of the race, 3 establishment-backed candidates dropped out. Incredibly, that included the eventual winner, David Crowley, who left the race, came back, and ultimately won. With progressives unified and moderate voters divided and bewildered, Hong built an enormous lead in the polls, and the ingredients for a major polling error came into place. In the end, Crowley's support surged as moderates coalesced behind him. The polls did slightly overestimate Hong. She won 39% of the vote while polls showed her at 44%, and it's possible this betrays a deeper kind of error. But it's also possible she lost support in the final week amid stories highlighting her general election vulnerabilities, such as her apparent opposition to Thanksgiving and Halloween. Cohn discussed this further on the Daily Podcast if you want to hear more. Michigan's deeper problem is that pollsters don't have easy excuses there. El-Sayed and Representative Haley Stevens, the establishment-backed candidate, were clearly the top 2. They offered a straightforward contrast, received national media attention, and benefited from tens of millions of dollars spent on their behalf. Voters had every opportunity to learn about them and the stakes. It's hard to believe many voters changed their minds. So what happened? One relatively innocuous explanation would be if pollsters were wrong about the makeup of the electorate. Maybe they overestimated turnout among young voters, who overwhelmingly backed El-Sayed. The final Emerson College poll, a rare high-quality nonpartisan poll of the race, reported a much younger likely electorate than in other recent Michigan primaries. If turnout was the problem, something specific to this race, pollsters wouldn't be doomed to repeat the mistake. But a more serious problem would be non-response bias, where one candidate's supporters are much likelier to take a poll than others. This is the challenge pollsters have faced measuring President Trump's support, and it's a hard problem to solve. In Michigan's case, progressive candidates tend to fare better among highly educated and highly engaged voters, who are likeliest to respond to political surveys. Worse, pollsters increasingly rely on methods that might exacerbate this problem, polling people who sign up to take polls online or who eagerly click text message links to polls. If the problem is non-response bias, pollsters could be in trouble. Over the last decade, they've relied on heavy-handed techniques to represent Trump's supporters among respondents, like ensuring the right number of voters who say they voted for him in the last election. There's no equivalent way to do that in a first-time contest between a progressive and a moderate Democrat. It's possible Michigan is just a one-off error, wrong pollsters, wrong place, wrong time. But if not, it might offer a clue about just how bad many polls are without the crutches they've used to hobble through the Trump elections. For more on this, our reporter went inside the Democratic Socialists of America's audacious quest for power. Socialists have wanted to take over the Democratic Party for years, and they've never gotten this far. Now, the newsletter opened with a note about the USS Abraham Lincoln, and senators are raising concerns about poor conditions aboard the carrier. It's been at sea for nearly 9 months. Democratic senators have begun raising concerns about the extended deployment amid reports about poor living conditions and a lack of downtime for the crew after more than 8.5 months at sea. The Lincoln, a San Diego-based aircraft carrier with a crew of about 5,000 sailors, is supporting U.S. operations in the Middle East against Iran. In a letter to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and Acting Navy Secretary Hung Chow, Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut described a list of reported problems on the ship. This is a story we'll be watching closely. Moving to the latest news in politics. The Trump administration is expanding fraud investigations against small businesses even as it drops charges against big corporations. As the White House expands its war on fraud, the Justice Department announced criminal charges in recent days against a new symbol of that battle, a food truck in Santa Ana, California. Soriano Produce, a weathered white food truck advertising ice cream treats as well as fruits and vegetables, drew the attention of undercover agents at Immigration and Customs Enforcement for what investigators said was a startlingly high number of food stamp transactions for such a small business. The case against the food truck operator stands in contrast to the administration's approach to larger corporate fraud cases. At the same time, a new national security memo calls for American companies to hack back against criminal hackers. Such cyber attack responses had been restricted to the military. The Trump administration is encouraging American companies to conduct their own cyber attacks against criminal hackers, a move White House officials say will help address digital scourges like ransomware, though some former officials and security experts warn it could lead to chaos. Under a national security memorandum President Trump signed late Wednesday, select companies would work with the Justice and Homeland Security departments to strike foreign cyber criminal groups. The practice would align the United States more closely with countries like China and Russia, where spy agencies have long relied on private sector hackers to help with national security missions. In the courts, a judge threw out the Trump administration's anti-Semitism lawsuit against Harvard, saying it cited isolated and episodic incidents. A federal judge in Boston dismissed the lawsuit Thursday, dealing a blow to the government's efforts to force the school to make a deal. The lawsuit was part of a broader pressure campaign to force the university to comply with government demands on issues including its handling of anti-Semitism and race in admissions. Judge Richard G. Stearns granted Harvard's motion to throw out the case, saying the anti-Semitic incidents cited in the administration's March lawsuit were isolated and episodic. And the Trump-allied board of the Kennedy Center voted to inscribe the president's name on the building a judge had ordered it removed. The board voted Thursday to inscribe President Trump's name on the building beneath the main signage, according to two people with direct knowledge, aggressively testing a federal judge's order. The inscription would read, "Restored and renovated by President Donald J. Trump." The board's decision, which directs officials to act by all legal means, came shortly after it voted to move forward with Mr. Trump's plan to shutter the building's acclaimed educational programs. Around the world, an American oil company backed by Dr. Phil says it could be on the verge of a major discovery in Greenland. In one of the most remote towns on Earth, on the frozen crust of Greenland's east coast, the American oilman made his pitch. Near to the very room where they were all sitting, he told a crowd of Greenlanders, could be as much as 13 billion barrels of oil. His company planned to drill 2 exploratory wells, and if it struck oil, it could be a major worldwide discovery bringing much-needed jobs, loads of tax money, and relief to world energy markets. The proposal comes at a tricky time for the Arctic island, and locals are lining up against it. An American missionary pilot held in Niger since last fall has been released. Freeing him had been a priority for the Trump administration. Kevin Rideout, a pilot, was abducted from his home in Niamey, the capital of Niger, in October. His mission organization said Friday he was in good health after his release. A U.S. official said Rideout had arrived at Ramstein Air Base in Germany and was undergoing medical evaluation. In the West Bank, the Israeli military evicted about a dozen settlers who had besieged 2 Palestinian families in their homes. Hours later, the settlers returned. The military's failure to keep extremists away from the 2 Palestinian families trapped in their West Bank homes made clear the chaos gripping the Israeli-occupied territory. The families had been trapped since Sunday by Israeli settlers who had erected a tent nearby and, residents said, attacked them including with rocks. On Thursday morning, Israeli soldiers dismantled structures set up by the settlers, confiscated some equipment, and ordered them to leave. But within hours, settlers were back. Women and girls in Afghanistan have been systematically erased from public life since the Taliban took power. The Taliban regained control 5 years ago this week, returning to power after 2 decades and restoring an Islamic government that severely restricted women's rights. In those few years, women and girls have been systematically erased from most public life, experts say, and the limitations imposed on half the population could hobble Afghanistan far into the future. More than 160 decrees have been issued targeting women's rights, a return to conditions that prevailed the previous time the Taliban controlled Afghanistan in the late 1990s. In science, scientists testing a telescope in Chile photographed the Helix Nebula and captured details of the aftermath of a star death never seen before. High in the mountains of northern Chile, the Mothra telescope, which stands for Modular Optical Telephoto Hyperspectral Robotic Array, may still be under construction, but it's already offering a new look at some of the universe's most difficult to photograph processes. During early calibration tests, the telescope's array of lenses, which will soon number 1140, captured stellar debris dissolving into space around the Helix Nebula, a striking example of the end of a star's life cycle. Mothra is designed to capture images of large yet faint objects in our night sky, particularly the cosmic web of diffuse gases and dark matter that spans the distance between galaxies. Studies of hundreds of thousands of women have shown that COVID vaccination is not linked to an increased risk of miscarriage, stillbirth, or preterm birth. Prominent Republicans and others have claimed this week that the shots aren't safe for pregnant women, but years of data show otherwise. Trump administration officials and other prominent Republicans falsely suggested COVID-19 vaccines were linked to miscarriage, seizing misleadingly on old text messages of Dr. Anthony Fauci's recently released by Republican senators. In January 2021, when COVID vaccines had just been released, Fauci and other Biden administration officials discussed the limitations of the data then available about vaccination during pregnancy, as well as theoretical risks based on information available at the time. Since then, studies of hundreds of thousands of women have provided robust evidence of safety. Researchers are mass-producing virus-blocking insects at a mosquito factory in Brazil. Our health reporter Apoorva Mandavili went there to see how it works. The city of Belém in northern Brazil was overwhelmed by an outbreak of dengue 2 years ago. An all-out municipal effort has reduced cases and may offer lessons to American cities. 10 years ago, Paulo Gomes still vividly remembers the terror he felt that his wife Luke Irene would never return from the hospital, that she would die instead of the dengue she contracted from a mosquito bite. Now health workers discard water from larvicide dissemination units as part of the ongoing campaign. Weather: Tropical Storm Lala could become the first hurricane to make landfall in Hawaii in more than 30 years. There's a tracker available if you're following its path. Meanwhile, a storm system battered the Midwest this week. Roads collapsed into sinkholes in Indiana, roofs tore off buildings in Illinois, and crews made water rescues in Ohio. At least 8 people have died from a storm system that has upended the Midwest and portions of the Mid-Atlantic over the past week, displacing people in several states and cutting power to hundreds of thousands of homes. Some of the most extreme weather occurred Tuesday when a derecho, a group of intense storms that can travel hundreds of miles and generate powerful wind gusts, swept into the region. The strongest gust recorded Tuesday was 99 miles per hour. Other big stories: California is considering adding a box on official forms that would let applicants list their ethnicity as Jewish. That has raised weighty questions about Jewish identity. The state recognizes nearly 50 racial and ethnic identities for data collection, from American Indian to Samoan. A bill that passed a crucial committee vote Thursday would require state agencies to include an optional box for Jewish ethnicity on all demographic data forms, from college applications to public assistance programs. Its passage would make California the first state to officially treat Jewishness as something more than a religion in this fashion, a shift more significant than it might seem. Flock, which makes vehicle tracking cameras, announced updates it said would improve privacy protections and root out misuse of its systems. The company's network of 120,000 cameras, which can read license plates, are used by 7,000 law enforcement agencies across the country. Police say the systems help solve crimes. But reports of misuse by law enforcement, along with anxiety over the technology's ability to surveil ordinary people, have led to protests and prompted some cities to end their contracts. Garrett Langley, Flock's CEO, said he realized they had a responsibility to do more. Critics say the measures are public relations and leave room for continued misuse. In opinions, as extreme heat becomes normal, firefighters in Phoenix have adopted a technique that could save lives across the country. Documentary filmmakers Nita Blum-Reddick and Jonathan Pickett embedded with firefighters at Station 18, one of the busiest fire stations in Phoenix, during some of the city's hottest days. They filmed a new inferno in 2025, during one of the hottest years on record globally. On one production day, temperatures reached 118 while they filmed outside. They documented a specialized technique of ice bag immersion for people facing life-threatening heat illness. And 2 writers argue the American left lost its way with DEI and cancel culture, but say the right's anti-woke backlash is also spiraling out of control. Gregory Conti and Aaron Sabarium write that Republicans have portrayed Democrats as beholden to bespoke identities, obsessed with an alleged genocide in Gaza, and enthralled to anti-American revisionism. They're critics of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs who largely agree with that characterization. They believe the Republicans' war on woke has made America a fairer, safer place by checking some of the worst excesses of modern progressivism. But they warn the right is now repeating the Democrats' biggest mistake. Warning reads, France has faithfully renovated most of what burned at Notre Dame in 2019. But not these 6 windows. 7.5 years after a raging fire nearly destroyed the cathedral, workers will soon begin installing the most contentious feature of its meticulous restoration, 6 towering stained glass windows depicting the Christian feast of Pentecost. Unlike the cathedral's gargoyles, paintings, and other treasures, which were refurbished, the windows are entirely new. The work of French artist Claire Tabaret, they depict landscapes and traditional religious processions in a contemporary style. They will replace 19th-century stained glass windows on the cathedral's south side, a decision that has sparked fierce debate. A rapper in the West Bank released a song criticizing a fellow Palestinian musician for his Western lifestyle. It's drawn comparison with the feud between Drake and Kendrick Lamar. Shabsdeed usually makes gritty, defiant music about the struggles of living under Israeli occupation. But in his latest song SLV, he's turned his ire on Saint Levant, a rising global pop star born in Jerusalem, partly raised in Gaza, who has also lived in Los Angeles and currently resides in Amman, Jordan. He's more likely to sing about his lovers than his homeland. That appears to be Shabsdeed's main gripe, mixing Palestine with all kinds of bullshit and European pretensions. Your pick. The most clicked link in the morning yesterday was tips from ophthalmologists about caring for your eyes. For things they wish you knew, they can get sunburned. When you expose your eyes to prolonged or intense UV light, you can develop photokeratitis, basically sunburn of the eye. Wear safety glasses whenever you're doing yard work, even for jobs that take only a minute. Doctors shared graphic descriptions of objects removed from patients' eyes. And more. Faking it, marketers are creating AI personas that can host podcasts, star in YouTube videos, and converse with followers. Times readers had thoughts. One commenter wrote, "This is exactly the type of garbage that has AI enthusiasm polling in the single digits, keep it out of our art, media, and culture. No one wants fake masquerading as real." Another wrote, "I knew everybody in the comments would hate this, but I don't mind it. How is this any different from creating illustrations to sell a product for a magazine ad, or creating an animated series to sell to a TV network? These are creatives making commercial art, like artists have been doing since the printing press was created to sell ads." Today's number, 2689. That is how many miles make up the King Charles III England Coast Path, a walking trail that traces the whole English coast. The writer Paul Theroux recently traveled part of it. There are stunning photos from his journey. Sports, in Dyersville, Iowa, the Philadelphia Phillies beat the Minnesota Twins 7-1 at the Field of Dreams game, played on a diamond built among cornfields. Kyle Schwarber was euphoric after living out his own version of Field of Dreams. In front of 26 members of the National Baseball Hall of Fame assembled for a game since 2008, Schwarber blasted 2 home runs to power his team to victory in front of 7,163 fans. Playing roughly 2 football fields away from the baseball diamond where Kevin Costner famously swung a bat in the 1989 film, the Philly slugger put on a legendary performance. And NIL, Peter Herbstreit, the ESPN broadcaster Kirk Herbstreit's golden retriever, has landed a name, image, and likeness deal. College football's great gold rush has been remarkably inclusive. Quarterbacks have cashed in, coaches command millions, and now the golden retriever. Peter, a 2-year-old dog, has landed a paid endorsement deal with Hertz, dressed in the most college football in 2026 label imaginable, and nil deal. The designation requires a little imagination. Peter is not an NCAA athlete, and the College Sports Commission has no jurisdiction over him. But Hertz is calling it nil anyway. Kirk Herbstreit now just holds the leash. Recipe of the day: this luscious carbonara is a reimagined take on the classic that uses every bit of in-season sweet corn kernels in the dish, cobs to flavor the pasta water, and silks as a sweet and surprising garnish. It's perfect for late summer. Take the shot. The Evil Dead is one of the great horror movie franchises, but unlike Alien, A Nightmare on Elm Street, and other peers, its signature is not a monster, weapon, or setting. It's an unsettling, indelible shot. Once you know to look for it, you'll see it everywhere. More on culture. More than any other stand-up today, Rory Scovel understands the humor of courting disaster, our critic Jason Zyneman writes. He says Scovel's new Netflix special is his best yet. In Show Must Go On, the appearance of unpredictability combined with the possibility of catastrophe is riveting. Perfection isn't funny. Flaws are. Triumph never makes people laugh the way struggle does. Scovel understands and exploits the daredevil humor of courting disaster. That's why he titled his initial Netflix special Rory Scovel Tries Stand-Up for the First Time, and performed 10 nights in a row at Brooklyn's Union Hall with no material, improvising hour after hour. One of his funniest impressions is of a guy who doesn't know how to play the piano faking his way through it. More than half the titles on the Book Review's recent list of the 50 best thrillers of the 21st century have been turned into movies or TV shows. Here are some worth watching. From Slow Horses to Big Little Lies, the list of great psychological thrillers, spy novels, and crime fiction has inspired a heap of great adaptations. Great thrillers, plot-driven by definition, lend themselves well to adaptation. The Morning recommends, elevate your bathroom with a new shower curtain. The home decor experts at Wirecutter have some recommendations. Read these new novels about rich people behaving badly. Very badly. And take our news quiz. Games, here is today's spelling bee. Yesterday's pangram was halcyon. And here are today's mini crossword, Wordle, connections, crossplay, and strands. Thanks for spending part of your morning with the Times. See you tomorrow.